it up. And I don't want the world to see me, 'cause I don't think that they'd understand. When everything's made to be broken, I just want you to know who I am. Don't show up, don't come out, don't start caring about me now. Walk away, you know how. Don't start caring about me now. Here I go.
Watch me take a good thing and fuck it all under one night. Catch me, I'm the one on the run away from the headlights. No sleep, about week wasting time with people I don't like. I think something's fucking wrong with me.
My last made me feel like I would never try again, but when I saw you, I felt something I never felt. Come closer, I'll give you all my love. If you treat me right, baby, I'll give you everything.
Pulling out the coupe at the lot, calling for a 12-fuck SWAT, buzzing all the bells out the box. I just hit a lick with the box, had to put the stick in the box. Pour up the whole damn steel, I'ma get lazy. I got the mojo deals, we been trapping like the 80s.
My last made me feel like I would never try again, but when I saw you, I felt something I never felt. Come closer, I'll give you all my love. If you treat me right, baby, I'll give you everything.
Don't stop, we're gonna celebrate. Can't stop, we're gonna celebrate. Oh yeah, one more time. One more time. Running down to the riptide, taken away to the dark side. I wanna be your left-hand man. I love you when you're singing that song, and I got a lump in my throat 'cause you're gonna sing the words wrong. One more time, running down to the riptide, taken away to the dark side. I wanna be your left-hand man. One more time, I love you when you're singing that song, yeah. I got a lump in my throat 'cause you're gonna sing the words wrong. Don't you?
Now she want a photo, you already know though. You only live once, that's the motto, nigga. YOLO, and we bout it every day, every day, every day. They be sitting on the bench, nigga. We don't really play every day, every day. Fuck what anybody say, can't see him 'cause the money in the way. Real nigga, what's up? Oh my God, Becky, look at her butt. Don't you? Now she want a photo, you already know though. You only live once, that's the motto, nigga. YOLO, and we bout it every day, every day, every day. They be sitting on the bench, nigga. We don't really play every day, every day. Fuck what anybody say, can't see him 'cause the money in the way. Real nigga, what's up? Oh my God, Becky, look at her butt. Don't you?
If our love is tragedy, why are you my remedy? If our love is insanity, why are you my clarity?
Roxanne, all she wanna do is party all night. Goddamn, Roxanne, never gonna love me, but it's alright. She think I'm an asshole, she think I'm a player. She keep running back though, only 'cause I pay her. Roxanne, all she wanna do is party all night.
Yeah! If our love is tragedy, why are you my remedy?
Roxanne, all she wanna do is party all night. Goddamn, Roxanne.
And then we're gonna financially recover from this.
DJ, let it play. I just can't gotta work what you got. Hey, you gotta work what you got. Supposed to be in class, but I ain't going unless chill on the couch. See what's on the telly, girl. We won't leave the house. Can you stay well? Can you stay well? Cause girl, I'm feeling lazy and I'm trying to hang around. If I could, then I would. I'll go wherever you will go. Way up high or down low. I'll go wherever you will go. If I could, then I would. I'll go wherever you will go. So testosterone boys and ugly girls, will you dance to the beat and hold on the cause? So testosterone boys and ugly girls, will you dance to the beat and hold on the cause? I walk a lonely road, the only one that I have ever known. Don't know where it goes, but it's home to me and I walk alone. My shadow's the only one that walks beside me. My shallow heart's the only thing that's beating. Sometimes I wish someone up there will find me. Till then I walk alone. These metal stars don't bring that pain. They're never gone away. They never gonna change. These metal stars don't bring that pain. They're never gone away. They never gonna change. These metal
Don't let me get her, chasing my cheddar. You ain't never listen to me. I got love. Don't let me get her, chasing my cheddar. You ain't never listen to me. I got love.
It ain't my fault that I'm out here getting loose. Gotta blame it on the goose. Gotta blame it on my juice, baby. It ain't my fault that I'm out here making news. Time to put it in the proof. Gotta blame it on my juice. Yeah.
Heaven and hell decide that they both are satisfied. Illuminate the nose on their vacancy signs. If there's no one beside you when your soul in the bars, and I'll follow you to
Gotta
the
blame it on my juice. Yeah. Blame it on my juice. Blame it on my juice.
If there's no one beside you when your soul in the bars, and I'll follow you to the
Muhammad is the most commonly used name on earth. Read a fucking book.
I need to hate you to love me, to love.
One. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. Big episode for you today. Penn State, first loss of the season, moved to 5-1 with the 41-17 beatdown in Ann Arbor. Sean Kane will be joining me in just a second to be discussing that and really what kind of went wrong. A lot to talk about, obviously, after Penn State's first loss. Can't really dwell too much with Minnesota and Ohio State up next. All that and more on this week's episode. Welcome into Hardcore Penn State Football. I'm Corey Listoki. With me, as always, the great Sean Kane. How are you doing today, Sean? You're muted, Sean.
Well, it's Sunday morning, but I don't feel easy on this Sunday morning.
No?
And if I am the great Sean Kane, I'm the only, and Corey, Penn State, hardcore Penn State football, Penn State is not great, unfortunately.
No, not the best showing obviously, this past Saturday. Penn State losing to Michigan 41-17, but really not even, just the way they lost, or sorry, just the fact that they lost, but the way they lost kind of the disappointing thing, I think, for most Penn State fans. It wasn't necessarily, if Penn State goes in there and loses by 3, whatever. I mean, I think people will be like, okay, well, that was definitely a plausible outcome coming in. Losing the way they did, Sean, to me, and I think to most people, was surprising. And yeah, let's get into it, because obviously it was an upsetting day. Because you want Penn State to take that next step. You want them to show that they belong at the top. And I think for a lot of different reasons, this kind of shows that maybe Penn State isn't there. And to be fair, I don't think coming into the season we expected them to be there. But the way, again, that they lost was below the expectations regardless. So, Sean, with that being said, I'm gonna flip it over to you and kind of let you go at it.
Yeah. It was an embarrassing performance yesterday. There's no other way to slice it. It was a little bit of everything. I didn't like Mike Yurcich's game plan. The 2 end zone fades. I thought they went out with Kirk Shraka and Ricky Ronnie. Apparently they're sticking around. So that was terrible. I didn't like Manny Diaz's defense. I didn't think we crowded the box enough. And we're still not tackling the way we should be tackling. So that's been an ongoing theme really throughout the James Franklin era. To be fair, it is tough. I'll get into the tackling a little later. And look, somebody who I brought up on the last podcast that I said we haven't talked a whole lot about this year is James Franklin. And at some point, you got to be able to go into Michigan against a good Michigan team with fans in the stadium and not get your doors blown off. It's inexcusable. I'm so freaking sick of this. And I'm so sick of losing to really good teams. Like you are defined by how you do against good teams, not by how you do against Ohio, not bringing up the out of conference record. Like, oh, look at how we are in September when we're playing Kent State 2 out of the 3 times. It really doesn't do much for me, guys. I got to be honest, it really doesn't. I want to beat those teams, but so what? You did what you're supposed to do. Like, can one of his teams, for once, do what, pull an upset? Show that you're taking the next step. Brings me to my next point. In 2020, Michigan and Penn State both had bad seasons. Penn State went in Ann Arbor and beat them, albeit without fans, but they did beat them. And both of them were at a bit of a crossroads with both their coaches. So we were both about here. 2021 starts. We both get off to a really good start. And Penn State totally implodes. And Michigan keeps going, and they ride that roller coaster all the way to the college football playoff. Now, they do get blown out by Georgia. Georgia's a much better team than they are last year. But they got there. They won the Big Ten. They beat Ohio State. They beat their rival. And we imploded. Same thing happens to start this season. Both undefeated. And, a lot of hype for this game. We go in there, and Michigan takes us to the woodshed. So Michigan is getting better. Ohio State's Ohio State. Ohio State's been an elite program for a long time. Michigan's probably in that second tier, they're probably a top 2 tier program right now. And I don't know if we're a top 20 program, to be honest with you. You got to show me this year. Because We don't look much different than last year watching that performance yesterday.
Yeah. I think what you hit on that frustrates me the most, like if we're looking at this overall, is kind of that last point, right? I mean, let me just send this out real quick. So, and I'll flip over my camera here. So, yeah, I think the biggest thing is this, Sean, and it's something that you hit on quite a bit, and I think it's really the probably the part that has Penn State fans upset the most, if I had to think about it. Because you're right, it's one thing if Michigan, or excuse me, if Ohio State is kind of leading the way, and is better than Penn State. I think most fans can agree that Ohio State's above Penn State. It's not okay in my mind, and I think in most people's minds, that Michigan is now kind of taking that next step up, right? And there was moments where Michigan and Penn State were kind of going back and forth there a couple years ago, and now it's becoming more obvious that Michigan has taken that next step. Now, I don't think Michigan has taken, like, just gotten way better players than Penn State. I do think on the offense and defensive line, they're better overall, generally. I also think the biggest thing we may have underestimated was that Michigan offensive line, clearly. And that, at the end of the day, was the biggest difference. I mean, nothing else really matters if you run for 418 yards. Like, we can go through the stats, and I can show you that really Penn State's offense didn't play any worse or better than they had all season. I mean, yeah, I would argue they played worse, but not dramatically worse. Not to the point where they were like just really hurting the Penn State defense. I mean, there was obviously 2 3-and-outs that makes Penn State's defense stays on the field a little bit longer, but it wasn't outrageously bad on offense. I mean, they didn't have a bunch of penalties. They didn't turn the ball over, and at least in the second half, they were at least moving the football and giving, their defense a little bit of a rest. It wasn't a good performance, but it wasn't offensively a poor enough performance to excuse what the defense did. And to me, Sean, the biggest disappointing thing about all of this was that defense and giving up that just from the get-go, right? It wasn't like it was something, Sean, that happened over time. It wasn't like they got worn out, and then a third and fourth quarter came and they finally just broke, right? Because then okay, whatever. Like, they were on the field the whole time. I understand that. No. From the very first drive, they were already running for 8 yards, 10 yards, 12 yards from the very first drive. So I don't want to hear they got worn out because the offense couldn't move the ball. No. The very first drive, although they held them to a field goal, they went right down the field running the ball. The very next drive, they went right down the field. They held them to a field goal. Good job. And then Penn State actually scores. Or I'm sorry, there's a touchdown, and then Penn State scores. And you're like, okay, it's a 13-7 game at this point, and you're like, the defense can now just start doing something. And what does the defense do? Another long drive, and they give up a field goal, and that's the half. Penn State only got 3 offensive possessions in that first half, and to me, that is what's so upsetting, is that the defense could not get off the field. And to me, when you're trying to talk about overall Penn State competing with Ohio State, competing with Michigan, to me, that is the difference, right? It's not about anything else. I mean, at the end of the day, we got manhandled. And to get manhandled like that was something I did not expect. I don't think a lot of people expected that. And so moving forward, how does Penn State compete when they've what I thought was a good defensive line coming in, what you thought was a good defensive line coming in? So to me, that's the part that's disheartening. I can get over poor offensive play calling. I can get over not being able to, move the ball on offense because whatever, or being, I guess, inconsistent on offense. I cannot get over that Penn State lost this game because the defensive line was just not even close, right? I mean, it wasn't even close. To me, that's alarming. If it was a 6-20 game and we lost because Sean Clifford threw an interception or two, or a freshman running back fumbles it, okay. Those are things that can get better. Those are things maybe Drew Aller coming in next year fixes up, and then Penn State's there. But it didn't matter if Drew Aller played today or yesterday. It didn't make a difference. Drew Aller could have been out there the entire game. It wouldn't have, unless he's playing defensive tackle and knows how to play defensive tackle. He wasn't going to do anything. So to me, it was a moment of realization that, man, it doesn't matter who was at quarterback. It honestly didn't even really matter who was at wide receiver or anything like that. We didn't have the guys up front on either side of the football, and that's the disappointing part about it.
Well, I mean, the one thing I really disagree with the coaches was when they put Sean Clifford in at middle linebacker. Like that was unbelievable. I couldn't believe we went and put him on defense, and then he was just as bad defensively. Oh wait, no, that didn't happen. That's a joke. That's a joke, people. So anyway, yeah, up front, not great. On either side of the ball. The offensive line, once again, I mean, I guess they did a decent job of protecting Clifford. He was only sacked once, and then Allard took 2 sacks when he got in. So, I don't know. I guess they did a decent job in pass pro. But, yeah, the run game was shaky at best. Not good. And by the way,
it was worse than shaky at best. It was way worse than shaky at best.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I mean, really, you take the Clifford run out.
It was terrible. I mean, actually, the 2 best runs of the day, Sean, were from Clifford. He had 12 or 13-yard scamper on that other play to set up that 4th and manageable.
Third down, yeah.
I think the longest run of the day was a 9-yard run. I think it was Singleton who had it, but otherwise, they didn't do anything.
No, I mean, it was, and at what, who has been off the past 3 games? Nick Singleton. He really hasn't done anything except fumble the ball in the past 3 games. And I'm not ready to press the panic button on Nick Singleton, but at some point it becomes a concern that our stud running back hasn't played well in a month.
Yeah, Sean, before we get down, because I obviously we have a lot to talk offensively. I just want to hit on a couple more overarching themes here before we really nail into the offense and the defense. One of them being Franklin's press conference afterwards. He said a couple things I think is worth at least highlighting before we dive deep. One thing, and I think it was a big thing. Landon Tangwall got hurt in warm-ups, didn't play. That does suck, right? Like that's just bad luck. Now, they had already been playing a lot of Norzad, so it's like, well, if at any of the spots you feel good about having to replace somebody, it was that left guard because they were sharing time for a while there anyway. But that does stink because, a lot of the questions we got asked today on Twitter were, is Franklin recruiting well enough on the offensive line? Well, Tangwa is actually one of their best recent recruits along the offensive line, and he didn't play. So that stunk. But was it enough to be the reason? Was it going to swing the game? No. But that did stink. Clifford got pulled for Aller. That wasn't just because they wanted Aller to get in, although honestly it probably only meant that Clifford would have probably just played one more series anyway. I mean, but it was worth noting that he got pulled because he was hurt, not because of, just calling the game. So that's something to pay attention to. Apparently it's a shoulder issue, and we'll obviously get into that a little bit more. And then the final thing I wanted to say from Franklin's presser was he said the defensive linemen were undersized, and we can talk a little bit about that later. So those are from Franklin. Penn State 3-7 now off of bye weeks. To me, Sean, and I tweeted this, I don't know if it really makes a difference if Penn State had a month to prepare for this game, because you cannot, at the end of the day, you cannot prepare for the manhandling, right? I mean, you can't tell me that if you give up 400 yards on the ground that it makes any difference as far as scheme. Like, you just got ran over, right? I mean, there's probably things, okay, maybe a little bit closer, but I don't think if there was this big of a difference along the offensive and defensive line that we saw, and again, who knows, right? Like, maybe this was Michigan's best day and this is Penn State's worst day, but regardless, there was an obvious discrepancy between the line of scrimmages, and I don't think it makes a difference in this situation whether they had more time to prepare. They were just outgunned, right? I mean, they just didn't stand a chance. And then finally, they
And
never made. Go ahead.
Whose fault is that?
Yeah, I mean that's
James
something.
Franklin's fault.
You can talk more about the building of the program, but as far as just the bye week trend itself, I mean, people can say that's the reason. I would argue that they lose big games regardless of when they happen. And then finally, they never made Michigan play their game, right? And that's probably, to me, the biggest thing. Like, if we went into this game and we were like, Michigan's going to play their game, I would say Penn State doesn't have a chance. But we all thought that Penn State was going to get Michigan in situations where they were going to have to throw the ball. And to be honest with you, Sean, when J.J. McCarthy actually had a drop back to pass and he didn't look amazing. He had a couple of nice play action boot throws early on, but there were moments he did not look like a good passing quarterback. He missed some. He just didn't see some people that were open. He obviously had the terrible interception. He should have had another interception, but they never made him do that very much. And that to me was like, well, no shit, Penn State got obliterated because they didn't ever get Michigan out of their game. And Michigan, and we said this about Harbaugh, when he gets a lead on you, he will bury you, and that's exactly what happened. So to me, if you tell me that Michigan's going to play their game, yeah, they're going to win and probably win easily. And that's exactly what happened, Sean.
Yeah, and look, I talked on the last podcast, I talked in the summer. I'm not a big time possession guy. But at some point, I mean, at one point it was something like, give me a second, pulling it up. I took a picture. It was 11 in the first quarter. They had the ball 11 minutes, 27 seconds. We had the ball 3 minutes, 33 seconds. And didn't get better in the second quarter. The discrepancy. They ran 50 plays in the first half. Yeah, you don't win games like that. Time of possession does mean something. I think people just kind of obsess about it when it's like a 6-minute difference. And it's not that big of a difference. It depends on what you're doing with the ball. But when they just dominate time of possession, yeah, you're going to have a tough time winning a game, especially against a physical opponent like Michigan. And look, guys, give credit to Michigan too. Like I've heard their fans all offseason say they think they're better than they were last year. I think they might be right. Especially offensively, like that physicality that they had last year. They still have that. They might not have a Jabo and Hutchinson at edge, although Morris is a good player. But I think they make up for it in other spots. I was very, very impressed by them. Now, you brought up recruiting in the trenches. Tyler Calvaruso from Lions 247 Sports actually this week went recruiting Michigan versus Penn State on offense. This is according to 247 Sports now. Michigan's average composite rating of their offense is 0.8996. Penn State's is 0.9154. Penn State, by just recruiting, is more talented offensively than Michigan. Now, you might be saying, well, Sean, what about the offensive line? Okay, left tackle, Ryan Hayes, higher recruit than Olu Fashanu. So they win that one. Trevor Keegan, who's their starting left guard, he's not as talent. He doesn't have as high of rating as Landon Tangwall, although Tangwall didn't play yesterday, so we'll throw that one out. Drew Scruggs, higher rating than their center. Zach Sinter, he's basically tied with Sal Wormley. And Caden Wallace was a higher recruit than Trente Jones, who didn't play yesterday. So along the offensive line, it's not like this huge discrepancy. I think it's more of a developmental issue. I don't think we're developing our guys in the trenches enough. Now, what is fair with recruiting is to say we haven't recruited tackle well enough. That is true. And the problem with that is it blends into guard play. Because take a guy like Caden Wallace, really should be a guard. We've talked about this ad nauseum. He's playing out at right tackle because we need him at right tackle because we don't have anybody else to put at right tackle. That's true. But again, who do I blame that on? I blame that on James Franklin. I blame that on Matt Limegrover. I blame that on Phil Troutwine. That in previous years they haven't been able to bring in offensive tackle recruits. So, I mean, my point is, it's one thing to get blown out by a team like Ohio State. It's one thing to get blown out by a team like Georgia. We shouldn't be getting blown out by Michigan. And by the way, defense. Let's do defense. Michigan's average composite rating of their starting defense, 0.9013. Penn State's 0.9158. So on both sides of the ball, we have higher recruiting talent than Michigan. And we get
Sean, I
blown
get
off the field.
I get what you're saying.
I'm sorry. It's not a talent issue.
No, see, but what you're not understanding though, Sean, is for example, that number has gone significantly up in this last recruiting class and the class before it. But the main contributors right now aren't the best players. Our best players are freshmen and sophomores, truthfully. I mean, that's just the bottom line, right? I mean, we're especially like take Drew Shelton. Like Drew Shelton really helps that recruiting number out. He's not playing right now. And yeah, you can say that the Michigan center technically wasn't rated as high as Juice Scruggs. That dude was a Remington finalist at Virginia last year, right?
That is true.
Like, I mean, I get what you're saying, but when it comes to offensive line ratings and rankings, there's a reason why it's difficult to of any position to scout and to feel good about. There is like the top tier offensive linemen in the country. The Alex Burkmeyers, for example, the Landon Tanglaws, I'd put in there. Javen Williams, I'd put in there, right? Who Penn State are trying to get that are like pretty certain that they're going to be like really good players. And most of the time, those guys don't come to Penn State, especially like you said, on offensive tackle. I don't see those after those top guys. I don't see anyone that's like obviously going to pan out. And I think the developmental thing is a huge point. Like I totally agree with you. Like they're not developing well enough on the offensive line, right? Because we've seen guys not play well at Penn State that go on and are playing pretty well in the NFL. So either there's a development, there's a scheme, there is something going on there. But to say that Penn State's offensive line technically should have been as good as Michigan's, I mean, I think that's a tough ask to say. Now, I don't know, because someone put this on Twitter, and I think this is a good question. I don't know how, for example, Brett Bielema at Illinois is able to turn around their offensive running game in a matter of not even a year. Like they were pretty much running the ball better right off the bat. Now, I don't know why that is so obviously the case, but is it just a scheme thing? Is it just a commitment? Like we're not running the ball 41 times, but it's clearly an issue. Now, and again, we talked about pass protection. I actually wasn't upset with the pass protection. I mean, Clifford had time and did multiple times step up in the pocket and throw it on third down. We were in third and long a bunch. And I thought there's that one play on that second drive where they brought the house and there wasn't a hot route open as fast as it should have been. And I don't know if that was just like, I think it was KLS over there that was running like a smash route, and he just didn't turn around fast enough. According to, and again, it was kind of cover zero across the board. But besides that one, I thought the offensive line did a respectable job against the defensive line compared to last year against Michigan. So I don't think the offensive line is really good. I think that's fair to say at this point. But I think the offensive line is getting better. And people after this game are like, what are you talking about? But they're running for 2 yards per carry more than last year. They're definitely better in pass protection. Are they Michigan level? Are they elite level? No, obviously not. No, they're not. But they're getting better. And so I don't know. In a year where we weren't expected to be the elite team anyway, you go on the road and you get humbled a little bit, Sean, right?
That's definitely fair. Oh, and by the way, those recruiting ratings, they're of the starting defense and of the starting offense. So, yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there. Yeah, something that, and I mean, I think it kind of sounds like an old school thing, like back in my day, but I think it's kind of true. I think it's fair to question how much James Franklin instills toughness in his teams, because toughness, it's something that you have to instill in your program. And I got to say, guys, and this sounds like a bad word, they look soft yesterday. They just got gashed again and again and again and again and again. And they had they didn't do anything to stop it. And that's on the coaches, but it's also on the players. Where's that senior leadership from PJ Mustipher? Where is it? He didn't look good. Like Adisa Isaac, any of these guys, like at some point you're like, God, guys, come on. They shouldn't have looked that bad.
I mean, toughness is great and all, but when you're literally outsized, like take the defensive line, for example.
And again, that's James Franklin's fault.
Okay, that's fine,
but
that's fine. But what my point is, just once you have the Joes there, you can be tough as you want. But Adisa Isaac against Michigan's offensive line is not going to be a great run stopper. Just is. Even Beeman, who has bounced from end to tackle, really is undersized for a defensive tackle. Mustipher is the only guy who is, and he's still he's right there as far as being the size. They don't have a 337-pound defensive tackle on the roster. And you're right, that is Franklin's fault. Absolutely. But they don't have it. And so once you get into the game, you can't all of a sudden find somebody like that. So yeah, I think they do need to bulk up internally there. But again, it's about playing Penn State's game, and they didn't force that. We can start. Let's talk defense first. I think that's where we're more frustrated. We'll come back to the offense, Sean. We said that they had to get Michigan to play Penn State's game, right? I did not understand the two high safety looks at the beginning of this game, because if going into the game that Penn State, the defensive line strength is pass rushing, why aren't you committing 9 or 8 guys to the box from the get-go and making J.J. McCarthy throw it right off the bat? They didn't do that. And to me, it's like, from the get-go, I'm making J.J. McCarthy beat me. That didn't happen. Because if I can get J.J. McCarthy in 3rd and longs, I feel better about my secondary, and I feel better about my defensive line in pass rush situations. I mean, I don't have the number off the top of my head, Sean, but the average 3rd down for Michigan yesterday was probably 3rd and 3, 3rd and 4, maybe. I mean, you're not going to stop Michigan with a dynamic quarterback as far as his legs go. You're not going to stop Michigan very often on 3rd and 4. You're just not going. You're not going to stop very many good teams on 3rd and 4. So to me, we thought Manny Diaz might be the difference in this one. To me, that was the biggest disappointing thing. I mean, you cannot let their ground game get going. And you want to talk about instilling toughness. I don't know why you believe you have 4. They said we have 4 potential NFL guys in the secondary. If you believe you have 4 potential NFL guys in the secondary, why aren't you putting them on islands and daring J.J. McCarthy to beat you from the get-go? To me, that was the second most disappointing thing to me was Manny Diaz's game plan from the get-go. We said Manny Diaz might be the difference in this game. He was the difference. He was the difference on how bad they were. I mean, there's no other way to say it. They did not come out schematically prepared to beat Michigan in the way we thought they were. It was actually, Sean, the opposite of what you kind of wanted to do.
Yeah, man, he certainly was the difference. The difference in how, like you said, in how bad we played. We didn't force a punt yesterday. That's embarrassing, guys. I mean, really, we didn't force a punt. And okay, again, you want to say we need to bulk up we got to bulk up inside, which is true, and it's James Franklin's fault that we're not bulking up inside. I don't know why and it's something my father has been on for a while. Like looking at the defensive line, we're just not that big. And outside of PJ, they're just not. Like it's not a like. I think Mike Morris is 280 pounds, and he's an edge guy. I think he's technically a linebacker, but they like to run a lot of 3-4s. They like to run out of 3-4 a lot. Like that's what we need more of, is to get guys up to that weight or somewhere close to that weight. And we're just not doing it. And yeah, that's going to put your team in a tough spot then. Yeah, I didn't understand why we didn't put the corners on islands more either, because the secondary in my mind, and it still is the strength of this team. So yeah, put them on island, load the box, and do what you can to contain Blake Corum. Like I thought that would definitely be a variation of what we were going to do. And you got to be able to trust your corners, and they've been ball hawks the whole year. So why not just do that? And I mean, our corners and run support yesterday, not good. Kalen King really struggled at times. And the safeties didn't really help much in run support. So it was an all around just total meltdown of epic proportions trying to stop the run. It kind of reminded me of the Illinois game a little bit from last year, if Illinois was good. Like if Illinois was good last year, that's how the game would have went.
Yeah, I somewhat, and we appreciate everyone chatting on live on YouTube. We appreciate that. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video. James Noter asks, were both of those long runs right up the middle? The one was a sweep, and they just literally had more guys over there. I'm not sure exactly. I think it might have honestly been a misalignment on defense, because there was.
I don't think we were set right.
There was nobody over there. They pulled 2 offensive linemen, and Carter got blocked, Elsden got blocked, and then there was Jair Brown was like 20 yards downfield. So I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what happened there, but that was one of them. Yeah, Sean, and it kind of goes back to you're talking about defensive tackle and getting meatier, right? But then, okay, Zane Durant comes in. He's a 4-star guy, so that helps your rating as far as ranking goes. It looks good, but Zane Durant is not a big guy, right? And so it keeps going back to the same thing, right? Like you have potentially, and okay, in a perfect world, Denai Dennis Sutton stays at edge, right? Like he is your prototypical size edge guy, but you could make the argument at some point he might even have to move inside to a 3 technique, just because you might be getting manhandled up front. And I don't know, Sean, if some of this had to do with trying to beat Ohio State and trying to have more speed and versatility. And if Ohio State drops back 30 times to throw, you want guys even at the defensive tackle spot that have more pass rushing ability. And I don't know if that's kind of where some of that stemmed from. But now that Michigan is for real again, you've got to find some more meat, because let's talk scheme real quick, Sean, because I tweeted about it and I was a little hyperbolic as far as how I said they would never beat Michigan. But the point is, Penn State will struggle with teams like Michigan. They will struggle with teams like Illinois. Throw Michigan or Minnesota in there. Minnesota runs more RPO stuff than those guys, but throw them in there. Throw the original Wisconsin in there. They're going to struggle with those guys more than the Marylands, than the Ohio States, because of scheme. I mean, they take the juice out of games, and I think that's just how it's always going to be. I mean, and you can say that's an issue, but it's the same reason why Ohio State struggles with certain teams and plays better against certain teams. And that is a part of it. Now, the good thing about playing in Michigan is if you can get them out of their scheme, you're going to blow the doors off of them. Kind of the same way Penn State could blow the door or get the doors blown off of them, right? Because if all of a sudden you're making Michigan throw the ball 35 times and they're trying to come back from behind, then you feel really good. But if it's almost like if you can't win the first quarter against Michigan, you're probably not going to win, right? You go back to 2019, they jumped out to a huge lead at first and looked really good. If you can't do that against Michigan, you're going to fall behind. And once you fall behind, you probably don't have the horses to catch up because you can't outman them up front. So to me, that's just something that Penn State's going to have to deal with for the time being. There's just no other way to say it.
Yes, but this also gets into my point that we could be getting worse, possibly. So, as far as the scheme goes, Penn State was 3-3 going into this game in the past 6 years against Michigan. Penn State under James Franklin has never lost to Wisconsin. He has a winning record against Iowa. So now, I mean, and let's be real, Michigan's offensive scheme isn't any different than it's ever been. Defensively, they are different because Don Brown was, he was Dr. Blitz, or Dr. Pressure, whatever they called him, and I thought he was very overrated. But their defensive scheme is different now, but their offensive scheme is the same exact thing. I mean, it's a Jim Harbaugh. I still think he basically runs the offense. Like that's his baby. And we're much worse against it than we used to be. Now in 2018, 2016, we did get blown out those years, but in 2019 we beat them. In 2017 we blew them out and we did fine against them. In 2020 we beat them. I mean, that concerns me right there. That they are getting better. We're getting worse. And by the way, our last 2 Iowa games, we lost to them. So are we just getting worse against this style? I don't know. I mean, I think it's an open question. But I really just and the other thing is, yes, I hear you in that. I think the defense is put together in such a way to be able to stop a team like Ohio State. But you're still in the Big Ten. And Ohio State is very capable, if Ryan Day could get over his ego, to go up, line up against you, and push you around. But the thing about Ryan Day is he wants to, I was about to use an inappropriate analogy. He wants to show everybody what he's got, and they throw the ball a bunch. When really, if you just run the ball a lot like Michigan does, like 60 to 70% of the time, you're probably going to win the Big Ten that way too. But they do more things. And James Franklin knows that, and that's why we have so much speed on the team now. But you're still in the Big Ten. You're still playing Big Ten teams week in and week out. And we lost 2 straight to Michigan now. So it's time to figure out how to beat them as well, because I don't think they're going away as long as Jim Harbaugh's there.
Yeah, I wouldn't go as far as saying Penn State's getting worse. I think the offensive line's better. I think Michigan, though, is better. I mean, there's no other way to say it. Michigan has improved. And I will say this. You can say the Michigan offense is the same, but the one aspect of Michigan's offense that isn't the same is having a dynamic quarterback. 2017, 2019, Michigan didn't have a dynamic quarterback, and that makes a big difference. There were moments, and just moments where they had to respect it, but there were moments where J.J. McCarthy, there was a 3rd and 8, and they ran a quarterback draw against Penn State. They couldn't do that with O'Korn as their quarterback. They couldn't even do that with McNamara as their quarterback. So I just think that they were more dynamic this year, and we talked about it beforehand. This was probably, besides Talia Tagovailoa, the most dynamic quarterback they're going to face this year. C.J. Stroud doesn't run it as much as J.J. McCarthy does. So, and I think Tagovailoa, unfortunately, I think he got banged up against Indiana, so that's hard to hear.
Yeah, got fired off the field.
So you could argue that this is probably the last time Penn State faces a quarterback that has at least the arm talent and the ability to run the legs. So to me, that makes them even harder to stop as far as running the balls. And they didn't have that in those couple of years. So you couple that mauling offensive line with 2 really good running backs, 5-star running back, and then you have a guy who at least is serviceable with his legs. And Fox was saying he runs a 4.5. I don't know if it's that fast, but he did run away from Curtis Jacobs, I think, on a couple plays. So they got some speed on. He's faster than Clifford, and I think Clifford is serviceable.
Yeah.
So I would say McCarthy's fast.
Yeah, he doesn't run a 4.4 like I think Gus Johnson said. He doesn't run that. He's not that fast, but he runs about a 4.5, maybe a 4.5 and change. And yeah, that could give you problems. And the other thing is we didn't set the edge well yesterday. Those read options killed us because we were so worried about Corum. And look, you're supposed to. I guess we just didn't have eyes on McCarthy, which again, you're supposed to be coached to do that.
Yeah, and I mean, we have the defensive stats up on YouTube here. Rushing yards per average, 3 yards worse for Penn State than it was coming into the game. They actually held Michigan to 6 yards per attempt, which is 3 lower than what Michigan had coming in. But again, it's because Michigan didn't have to throw the ball very far. They didn't have to throw it deep. They had that nice throw to Cornelius Johnson early in the game, but that was about it. They gave up 65% on third down, which, again, not surprising to me when the average third down is like 3rd and 4. So that's money. You have a mobile quarterback, a Heisman candidate at running back. 3rd and 4s are easy all day. I mean, I don't care how good your defense is. You don't want to be in 3rd and 4s all game long. And when they did have to throw the ball on third down, they weren't great at it. The only really good thing, and I guess you could credit them for the turnover, but the only good thing that gave Penn State a chance was that they were holding Michigan to field goals in the red zone for a while there. So that was probably the only positive coming out of the defense. We haven't even talked about linebacker play yet, Sean, because in my opinion, that was my biggest question mark coming into the game. I was most disappointed. I want to be very clear. I was most disappointed with the defensive line play because I thought we had a good enough defensive line to at least get them off schedule and give ourselves a chance. The linebacking play was, I mean, obviously the worst it had been all season, but I was extremely disappointed with everybody because we don't have high expectations for Jonathan Sutherland, but he played terrible. He got washed down by offensive linemen. Offensive lineman got to the second level and he couldn't get around them. There was that one play where he actually got to Corum in the hole. Maybe it would have been a yard gain. He somehow got away, and I think Corum got 7, and that was on a 2nd and 10. So it went from a 3rd and 9 possibly to then a 3rd and 3. And it's like those are the things you gotta wrap them up. You gotta give yourself a chance on a 3rd and long. Those make the difference in a game against Michigan. Tyler Elsdon, his worst game. He didn't wrap up. There was that one play where he was right there and he literally just shoved Corum, and Corum got to the outside, got a big game. That was disappointment. I thought Elsdon and Kobe King both struggled as far as reading Michigan's tackles and also Michigan's tight ends, which often led Penn State right to the ball if they would just have watched them. They didn't tackle, and they were just slow. So, and honestly, Curtis Jacobs didn't have a great game either. I mean, he wasn't alarmingly awful, but those are the games you want Curtis Jacobs to step up and be the dude. And that third down, it was a third down right before the big run in the second half. Jacobs came off the edge. He's got a true freshman running back in pass protection, and he elects to go around him. And J.J. McCarthy steps up and eventually runs for the first down. The next play is the big. I would have rather seen him just run right through a true freshman running back and just see if that guy can stop you and keep McCarthy in the pocket. He tries to go around. McCarthy steps up, converts on 3rd and 4. The very next play is a long touchdown run. So those are just the small moments. It's a 3rd and 4. You send the blitz. You got to find a way, and maybe there's a little bit of a holding. I don't care. You got to find a way to make that play if you're Jacobs there because, again, he's one of those highly rated guys that you expect to make those plays. They didn't make those plays. Abdul Carter, I thought, played okay. I think he's obviously the most talented as far as those younger guys, but I mean, how much can you really expect him to really play or to make a huge difference? I mean, that this was the Curtis Jacobs game, and just all things considered, Sean, the linebackers, I was concerned about them coming in, and they ended up being bad.
Yeah, and to be clear, Jacobs did have the pick 6. But overall, yeah, I mean, on a play-in, play-out basis, just wasn't what you need him to be.
Yeah,
so
I mean, if anything, you
points
give credit to Chop Robinson on that play more than Jacobs. I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
it falls right into Jacobs' lap. I mean, it's a cool play, and I wish Penn State would have won because we could remember that play forever. But it wasn't like Jacobs, ball hawked an interception and took it back. It fell into his lap. Let's give Chop Robinson the credit for being there and making the play, and give credit to PJ Mustard for his helmet, because that's really what did it. So, yeah.
I actually thought it bounced off the ground at first. And I was like, oh, it went off of PJ. And then it was such a bizarre play, and it was awesome, but it was one of the only awesome parts of the game. Elsdon, I mean, look, we told you all off-season linebacker. Linebacker is a concern. I hope we're good at linebacker. I hope we're better than we think at linebacker. We are not better than we thought at linebacker. And the concerns that we had about Jonathan Sutherland, who I agree with Corey, wasn't good yesterday. I mean, he was pretty bad. He was really bad. I mean, he missed tackles that as a 6-year senior you can't miss. I mean, and that's, again, a lot of it's on the coaches, but some of it's on the players. Like, you got to be able to make a tackle. I mean, come on. It's not like, and Elsdon and King, yes, are they first-year guys? Yeah, but they have 5 games under their belt now. I mean, I think James Franklin actually said it's hard to consider them first-year guys anymore because they have a lot of playing time. And, I mean, it doesn't look like they've gotten to that level that you need to get if you're going to beat an Ohio State, if you're going to beat a Michigan. I thought Elsdon looked a tad slow at times. There were multiple times that I just saw Blake Corum running away from him. And to be fair to him, Blake Corum was running away from a lot of people. Yeah, he didn't tackle well. Kobe King, I mean, it felt like he was non-existent when he was on the field. He really didn't do anything, and you can't have that. So, yeah, all around, I give the linebackers a big fat F yesterday. And that's not good enough. Did the defensive line help them a ton? No. I mean, the defensive line was getting blown off the ball. And to be fair to the linebackers, you could have Paul Posluszny, Sean Lee, and Navarro Bowman out there. Yeah, it's going to be tough for them too, because those guys are just coming right at them with full steam ahead. But the plays that they had to make, they didn't make. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when your linebackers are on their heels the entire game, you're not going to be good. The offensive line got to them. They didn't know when the pass was coming, and they couldn't stop J.J. McCarthy when he decided to run. So they kind of failed in every aspect of it. It's one thing for it to be a concern and for them to not play well. It's another thing for them the whole front seven to really just lay a huge egg. And again, maybe I should have started with this too, because I really am a big believer in this quote. And it's, you're not as good as you think you are when you win, and you're not as bad as you are when you lose. I believe in that, truthfully. And I really think that's the case when you play Michigan because of how good Harbaugh is at burying you. That's not saying, not trying to excuse anybody, but moments like this, when everything's clicking for one team, I like to call it kind of like a quicksand game. The harder you try to get out of it, the more you sink. And that was the case. I don't even know how to grade the secondary, Sean, because you're right. They didn't tackle very well. I didn't think Penn State gave them a chance, which is so frustrating to me. Didn't give their best group really a chance to shine. I mean, I would have rather seen, and again, 8, maybe even 9 guys in the box if you couldn't stop them, and just give them a chance to get burned. And we never even saw that, which is frustrating to me, because if I'm trying to rely on my linebackers or my secondary, if I'm Penn State and Manny Diaz to win me the game, I'm relying on the secondary all day long. I'm not putting the game in Kobe King, Tyler Elsdon, and Jonathan Sutherland's hands. I would rather Jair Brown, Jalen Reed, who, by the way, missed that bone-breaking tackle at one point late in the game. I'm putting those guys in the box. Akee Wheatley, I'm putting in the box. And I am just saying, I have 2 guys on the outside, maybe even 3 or 4, that I think apparently could be starters in the NFL. I'm letting them just win or lose me the game. I'd rather them, if J.J. McCarthy comes out and he throws for 250, 300 yards, 3 touchdowns, no interceptions, and Penn State loses, I'm like, okay, whatever. Like, they showed to me then that Michigan is a really good two-dimensional team. That's the thing. We don't even know how good Michigan is as far as passing the ball because we never even made them do it, which is so frustrating because, like, yeah, we know now they're really good at running the ball, but we never even got to the point in the game where we had to make Michigan throw the ball against his Penn State secondary. And to me, that's upsetting because I thought the defensive line, again, was going to be good enough to let the secondary shine and to maybe expose McCarthy. Never even got to that point. Sean, I do want to mention, because this is something that was talked about a bunch, it was because the offense wasn't on the field much. Again, guys, the defense was giving up big plays on the ground from the get-go. I don't want to hear they were tired. I don't want to hear that they were depleted. Baloney. They gave up big drive after big drive from the start to the finish. The second half, Penn State goes down, gets a field goal, pretty sustainable drive. Not even after that play with Jacobs, the second first down, they break a big run for a touchdown. That can't happen out of the half. And we had talked about how Manny Diaz's defense had been better in the second half. That wasn't the case. And then to come out, so then Penn State goes down the field, another sustainably long drive, turnover on downs. They had to go for it because Penn State hadn't stopped Michigan yet. Was okay with that decision. And then the defense gives up a big run again. And again, they hadn't even been on the field for more than 5 plays in the second half. So I don't buy that, Sean. And I think I understand that is typically a good reason. Not on the case on Saturday.
No, I mean, it was right from the first drive. I mean, are we gonna blame Sean Clifford and the offense for the first drive where they pounded us? Although we to our credit, we did hold up in the red zone, but like the whole game, they kept doing the same thing over and over again. J.J. McCarthy, all right, that's a bit of an exaggeration, but I don't think really. If he only threw the ball 5 times, I don't think it would have made a difference. I think they still would have won. I really do. Maybe he'd have to throw more than 0 times. But I think if he threw the ball 5 times, wouldn't have made a difference. Because they just dominated us up front.
They could have ran every play and just sprinkled in more read option and literally not thrown the ball. And maybe they wouldn't have won by as much, but I still think they win the game. I mean, literally, that 3rd and 2, Sean, that we got the pick 6, it was a 3rd and 2, and they decided to go play action instead of just running it.
Yeah, they should have ran it.
So, I don't even want to
about that.
You can literally argue the reason why it wasn't worse in this game was because they decided to throw in that situation. So, yeah, I'm not saying Michigan's a bad team. Obviously, they're very good at running the ball. They might not even have to go the whole season without having to throw the ball. They're that good running the ball. So I'm not saying they're bad or anything. I think they're really good. But I wanted to see J.J. McCarthy beat us, and we couldn't even get to that, Sean.
Yeah, I mean, what did we think was going to happen? Like, that's what I was watching this game, and Michigan's not reinventing the wheel on offense. They're not, like, one of the things going into this game, both fan bases were both saying, Mike Yurcich didn't open up the offense yet. Wait till you see what we got. And they were saying this, Michigan fans were saying the same thing. They're going to open it up against Penn State. No, they didn't. They kept doing the same exact thing they've been doing. They did against Colorado State. And hey, if you put Colorado State on the field, it wouldn't have looked any different. I don't know the stats off the top of my head, but I don't know if they got 400 rushing yards against them. I mean,
yeah, that 400 yards rushing, by the way, most given up by Penn State since 1997 against Michigan State.
There you go.
Not very good there. We could beat that horse dead all the time. Oh, I wanted to also say, this is from The Athletic, gave up more rushing yards to Michigan than all of the games combined for Penn State so far this season, which is just insane to think about.
Wow.
So all of the other 5 games previously gave up more yards against Michigan combined today. Sean, let's flip the offense, because as bad as the defense was, And I would honestly, if someone says I have to blame one side or the other, which again, that's not how football works, I would blame the defense. But the offense, really, out of the gate, disappointed with, because for two different reasons. Two of my main reasons I was upset. Number one, we both thought this was a Katron Allen game. Let me flip this over to me real quick. See if I can get this off here real quick. We both thought that this was going to be a game where maybe the offense steps up. So, two things that upset me the most with the offense. Number one, you come out and you don't do anything different out of the bye. You come out, you run the ball pretty unimaginative on offense on the first two series. And I don't know if that was just, hey, we're going to try to establish the run. I don't know what the exact thought process was, but they looked just uncreative out of a bye week. You thought maybe there'd be a wrinkle or two. You thought maybe there'd be something fun to maybe get Michigan's defense on their heels a little bit. No, not at all. They ran a off tackle run on a 3rd and 2, 3rd and 1.5, and it didn't look like it had a chance. And there wasn't even motion on that play. So the first two drives, super unimaginative. The only reason the third drive was any better was because Sean Clifford did something. Otherwise, the play calling wasn't any better on the third drive. The biggest thing I was upset with, though, Sean, we both thought this game was going to be a game where this was a Katron Allen game, right? We thought maybe a Nick Singleton game coming up against Ohio State where you need some more explosive plays. We both thought this was the Katron Allen game. Run the ball, stay on schedule. We didn't see Katron Allen either. I thought, okay, the first series you give to Singleton, whatever, he's a starter. Then the second series, and we didn't see Katron Allen again. I was like, all right, like, why? So I was disappointed there. We did see him on the third series, and it's a coincidence. But that third series, they did score, and the only reason they scored was, again, because on that 4th down and goal, Katron Allen got the ball, was able to break that arm tackle in the backfield and get in the end zone. So super disappointed that Katron Allen wasn't kind of the guy to start with, when I think he's more of the bruiser, more of the guy who's going to get you 3 or 4 yards and keep your offense on schedule, which is very obvious that the Penn State offense can't get behind schedule. And the second thing, Sean, the glaring thing to me, where do these red zone fades come from? Didn't hurt them in that one drive. They still scored on the third drive of the game. But that drive to start the second half, 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, they go to a goal line fade to Mitch Tinsley. Now, again, it was really good coverage. I mean, Clifford, you throw it to a spot in that situation, but it was never there. And you thought that's as creative as we can get on a 3rd and 4, as with as much talent as this team has in the skill positions. And Clifford had shown the ability to run the ball. So I did not like that play call. I thought in general the offensive play calling was disappointing. I wasn't expecting them to reinvent the wheel, but I thought there'd be a couple new wrinkles. I thought there'd be something different. And on top of all that, Sean, they didn't get the tight ends involved. 1 catch for Brenton Strange. Theo Johnson didn't do anything. Tyler Warren didn't do anything. Just, again, not what we knew coming in that maybe the receivers weren't great. And so I don't understand why we were asking the receivers to beat Michigan instead of trying to get some mismatches with Brenton Strange, trying to get the running backs in space more, using Clifford more in the running game. I know he had that one play. That draw run play isn't working anymore, by the way, where they kind of fake the screen and he runs up the middle. They tried that against Auburn. It didn't work. I don't know why we didn't just see more straight-up RPO or straight-up read options with Sean Clifford. Overall, Mike Yurcich, I thought, again, Manny Diaz didn't do very well. I thought Yurcich coming out of a bye week. This is now back-to-back years where Mike Yurcich's offenses has only put up 1 touchdown in the game after the bye. So to me, that was the biggest thing I was most disappointed with. The utilization of Katron Allen and just the overall lack of wrinkles, lack of getting the playmakers involved on offense.
Yeah. The last thing in my long soliloquy last week when I foolishly picked Penn State was I thought this was going to be a big Brenton Strange game. And we threw the ball to him once. He had 1 catch. I mean, guys, come on. The thing Michigan was afraid of the most was their linebackers against our tight ends. And we barely used the tight ends. I mean, that's inexcusable. That's coaching 101. You take their weakness and you attack it. Michigan did it again and again to us. They ran right at the linebacker. They ran right at Elsdon and Sutherland, and they kept doing it again and again and again. And that doesn't take. Look, Mike Yursich is probably making north of $1 million. I'm not making anything. I'll tell you right now. Like, yeah, you just go at their weakness. I mean, come on. And yeah, I hear you on the K-Tron Allen point too. Like, I think this was, we talked about K-Tron Allen games. And when you think of a K-Tron Allen game where you need a power guy that's going to give you some electricity as well. Yeah, that Michigan game is that game. And I wouldn't have objected to him starting because, frankly, Singleton, I think it's fair to say he's struggling right now. And that's common for freshmen. I think he kind of hit a wall a little bit after the Auburn game. And I'm not panicking about Singleton. I still think he's an awesome talent. And I still think he's going to be a really good player for us. Right now, he's in a bit of a funk. And that's fine. So I think right now, I wouldn't object to K-Tron Allen starting next week. And still play Singleton a lot, of course. Because I don't think he sucks. I don't think he's unplayable or anything. But K-Tron Allen looks better than him right now. I mean, straight up, he looks pound for pound like a better running back. So start him. But definitely play Singleton because he's still your home run threat. Yeah, and Red fades to the end zone should be illegal. I mean, they're so mind-numbingly dumb. They're such low percentage plays, and they're the quote-unquote safe play because they are hard to intercept. Yeah, they're hard to catch. That's why they're hard to intercept, because they are hard. It's hard to have a quarterback execute it, and then it's hard to get a receiver underneath it to catch it. There's such low percentage plays. So why are we doing it? Why are we doing it twice? It's just so... I couldn't believe we did it twice. I couldn't believe we did it the first time. And then we did it again. And I thought that went out. I thought we were done. And then we're doing it again with a different offensive coordinator. Why? Why is that even in the playbook?
Yeah, I thought if you're, it's one thing if you get like Theo Johnson, like you motion him out.
You do it with receivers.
And you have like Theo Johnson on an undersized linebacker or an undersized safety. Like I can see maybe doing that, right? But Parker Washington on a fade route, like that's not something I really want to try to take advantage of. Yeah, I will say this, and this is probably the again, it's just how stats are. Technically, Penn State ran the same as far as rushing yards per carry that they had all season. This pretty much the same passing yards per attempt as they had all season. They were actually better on third down than they were coming in. They were 100% in the red zone with touchdowns, and they didn't give the ball away. So, I'm not trying to say they played well on offense. They didn't. But it's funny to me that if you told me all those things were true, Sean, I'd be like, oh, we have a really good chance of winning this game. We have 0 giveaways. We do respectable on third down. We run for 5 yards per carry. Now, most of that's because of Clifford's big run. I feel pretty good, especially if Clifford's like runs for, I think he ended up with 80 yards, not including sacks. Like, I'd be like, wow, we have a really good chance of winning this thing. And it wasn't even close. And I think it just to me proves that, yes, the offense was bad and those moments stunk. But if you're gonna say that Penn State was blown out because they went 3-and-out twice, to me that's unexcusable. Still, it still comes back to the defense. So they were bad, but they weren't that much worse. And to be honest with you, people were saying that somehow Sean Clifford should have been pulled. I mean, are you ready for that conversation? Because
yeah, let's just do it.
All right. So let me flip over to me again here. I get two different things about this, because there's two important things that we need to differentiate and how these things are all kind of being done. Because if you just want, as I'm trying to get rid of that thing one more time here. When you're looking at the quarterback situation now that Penn State has a loss, it's a little bit different now, right? And I think it's also important to realize it's different now because Penn State got blown out rather than it being a close loss. So here's where the quarterback situation really lies. There's really two trains of thought. Three. One's stupid, and then one I can agree with if you're willing to admit that's where Penn State's at, which I think I'm getting there. The stupid thought is that Drew Aller would have played better against Michigan and potentially put Penn State in a better position to win yesterday. To me, that's just plain out stupid. It is. Aller came in. Aller, I think, really could be a great throwing quarterback, but he's not a dynamic runner, and we saw that when he got to play. Now, I'm not going to grade out his performance against Michigan, and taking that with a grain of salt and moving on with it. Had some nice balls, had some meh balls, and then at the end of the day, he's still, although he has good pocket presence, he still can't really be that mobile, even to Sean Clifford. He definitely wasn't going to break the run that Sean Clifford broke. He definitely wasn't on that 3rd and 19. Clifford picked up 12, 13 to give them a chance. Aller wasn't going to do that when nobody else was open. Aller probably would have got sacked. And I'm not asking Aller to be better than Sean Clifford right now. That's not at all what I'm hoping for. So I think that idea that Aller comes in and Penn State plays better, I don't agree with that. Especially since Sean Clifford had two really good throws. One to Trey Wallace that set up the field goal drive, which I thought was one of his better throws of the season so far. And then after he took that shot in that 3rd and 19, he comes back on the field for the 4th and 6 and throws a catchable ball to Parker Washington. Again, I didn't like the play call, but Parker Washington, you got to catch that one. Like, you're supposed to be the guy. Hits off your hands. It wasn't an easy catch, but I think Parker Washington would even tell you he needs to catch it. So I thought those two throws were fantastic. Thought there was one bad throw Clifford had to Tinsley, but otherwise I didn't think Clifford honestly played that awful. I thought he stayed alive for as much as he could, getting no help from anybody else. Moving on. Moving forward. You have two realistic trains of thought here. The first one, you still think Penn State can win games. You still think Penn State can beat Ohio State. Therefore, Sean Clifford should be your quarterback to at least Ohio State. That's one train of thought. Don't pull him until the Ohio State game. And then Aller, and let's say Ohio State beats Penn State. You have 2 losses. Then you can still play Aller for the final 4 games plus the bowl game. He still gets 5 games of starting. Honestly, I'm still on that train because Penn State only has 1 loss. And if anything, in college football, we know that crazier things could happen. I don't think Penn State's going to beat Ohio State. But I'm still on, I think, assuming Clifford's 100%, I should kind of clarify that. I still think you start Clifford against Minnesota and Ohio State because I think if you have 1 loss and you're just going to say the season's over, I think that sends the wrong message to your team. If Clifford isn't 100%, I get into my second point that the second train of thought people could have, and that is start Aller from here on out. If you're going to do that, it's either A, because Clifford's not 100%. And if Clifford isn't 100%, I think you'd go to Aller right away. On top of that, even if he is 100%, the other argument is we're not going to beat Ohio State because it doesn't matter who's at quarterback. If we give up 400 yards on the ground to Ohio State, it's not going to matter. That's a fair point. So start Aller against Minnesota at home, against a Minnesota team that's sort of reeling. Get him some confidence, get him some playing time, and then Ohio State happens, take it for a grain of salt. Probably not going to, have a great day, but whatever. And then he gets the rest of the season to develop. I'm okay, honestly, with either. I will say this, though, Sean. If the idea is to play him in the Ohio State game, then just start him from the Minnesota game. I really don't want the first game to be against Ohio State. So either you start him for the Minnesota game or you start him for the final 4 games after Ohio State, excuse me. I don't like this idea of trying to start him for the Ohio State game. If Clifford is not healthy, And we don't know how injured he is because, again, the game was kind of out of reach. It wasn't 100% out of reach. So we don't know if it was a precautionary thing or not. If Clifford's not 100%, I think you roll with Aller anyway because you got to be able to throw the ball relatively well. And if that shoulder injury that we're assuming is presuming to be a shoulder injury, if that's going to lower Clifford's ability to throw even more and his consistency is going to be even less, and he's scared to run because he doesn't want to hurt his shoulder, then you got to go to Aller anyway. So my personal thought, if those are the two scenarios, my personal thought is if Clifford's 100%, I don't want, and again, that's a big if in my opinion. If Clifford's 100%, I'm starting him against Minnesota, and presuming he's healthy against Ohio State, I'm starting him against Ohio State because, again, I think he gives you the best chance to win. However, if he's not healthy, I go Aller right away. If you're going to go Aller right away, again, I want to reiterate, you are basically saying the season's over, and you don't expect to beat Ohio State. You expect there to be some bumps and bruises, potentially even a third loss at some point in the season. Sean, I will say this, though. Assume Penn State beats Minnesota with whatever quarterback. Clifford starts against Ohio State, they lose, and you want to go to Aller the rest of the way, that's fine. But I don't think as far as winning or losing games, the expectations should change that drastically. The final 4 games are, to me, must-wins, even if Aller is the quarterback. If he's this 5-star guy that everybody wanted to be the starter at the beginning of the season, and he's that dynamic of a guy, the expectation is going to be for them to beat Maryland, to beat Rutgers, to beat Indiana, and to beat Michigan State, especially with Michigan State's pass defense. So if you're going to go that road, I expect there to be questionable interceptions or missed plays because he's a true freshman. But I still expect Aller to lead Penn State to a 4-0 record in November.
Yeah, when you're the guy then. I mean, then you're expected to beat Rutgers, Maryland, Indiana, Michigan State. I mean, it's not really a murderer's row. So I'll address what Corey said. The first thing. Would it have made a difference if Drew Aller played yesterday? Yeah, it would have. No, I'm just kidding. It wouldn't have made a difference. Like, come on. Like, they don't play defense. Like, no. I mean, no, it wouldn't have made any difference. And in all likelihood, we probably would have played worse if Drew Aller started. But going forward, so next week, if Sean Clifford isn't 100%, then yeah, you start Drew Aller. Like, if he's questionable, start Drew Aller. And odds are, if you start Aller next week, yeah, he's probably the guy for the rest of the year, and that's probably the last we saw of Sean Clifford. Okay, I'm okay with that. But I agree with Corey too. You don't want what you don't want. What I fear more than anything is we find a way to lose to Minnesota next week, and then we start Drew Aller against Ohio State. I don't think we lose to Minnesota, but you know how we are after bye weeks. Not after bye week. You know how we are after bye weeks too. You know how we are after losses historically in the Franklin era. I mean, the team, I don't know if they get into a depression or I don't know what happens, but they're not the same team the next week. And yeah, so if you lose to Minnesota with Sean Clifford, then you go to Drew Aller against Ohio State. I mean, that's a scary proposition to start a true freshman against the Buckeyes, his first game. And I think it's a fair question to say who should start next week. And I have trouble with it, and because I do understand the argument, especially after getting blown out by Michigan, to say, well, we're going to lose to Ohio State anyway, so why not just start Drew Aller? Okay. I mean, but at the same time, what if we beat Ohio State? I don't think we're going to, guys. I'm not a delusional person. I don't think we're going to after watching that yesterday. But we got blown out in 2016 and we beat Ohio State. I mean, it's possible. Upsets happen all the time in college football. All the time. I mean, so I don't know. I mean, if Cliff's healthy, I'd probably start him next week. But I'd have him on a very, very short leash. And if he's banged up at all, then I start Drew Aller.
Yeah, I agree with that. If he's not healthy, I think you move on at that point. And I want it to be very clear. We don't see it a lot, but some people like to say, "Oh, well, if Aller struggles, then you just put Clifford back in." No, you don't. No, you don't. Once that's done, it's done, and that's just it. So yeah, Sean, I agree. And yeah, if you want to make that transition during the Minnesota game, I think you could. But I really don't think that's going to be an issue against Minnesota.
Yeah, if we're I'm sorry. If we're dead next week and we're not doing anything, even if it's not necessarily Sean Clifford's fault, but Sean Clifford's not making it better, then I'm okay with putting Drew Aller in.
Yeah, and then again, this doesn't really go against anything we've said this from the get-go at the beginning of the season. I mean,
we've been very consistent on this for all you Twitter people.
It doesn't change anything really. So yeah, I mean what scares me, Sean, if we're gonna be honest, is Penn State has had, and Clifford isn't the same runner that Trace McSorley is, but Penn State has had at least somewhat of a dynamic running quarterback that has helped this offense. Mobility, even just the ability that maybe Clifford will run makes a difference. And when we make that switch to Drew Aller, although he can take it and he's a big guy and he's going to be hard to bring down, he is not really a running quarterback. And with the offensive line being questionable, better, but questionable, how much more can they focus on just stopping Nick Singleton and Katron Allen with the lack of Clifford being able to run? So that, to me, scares me because I think Drew Aller, again, can be super dynamic with his arm. And maybe they just spread everybody out and they let him throw it 60 times. I don't really know, though, if that doesn't work, can Penn State line up and run the ball? Because they couldn't do it with Clifford, and now you take out some of that, extra dimension of Clifford being able to run it. That does worry me, Sean. And I hadn't seen anything yet from Aller. Again, tiny sample size. But I haven't seen anything that's like, holy crap, like this guy is a game changer from the get-go. Like we haven't seen Tua Tagovailoa stuff or anything like that or Bryce Young ability where he's making guys, making circus plays. And I'm not expecting that. But as far as making an immediate impact where he's just going to all of a sudden be this huge spark, I don't know how you have a huge spark when you can't run the ball consistently regardless of who it is. So to me, Sean, that is the part where I'm like, bring Aller in, but I don't want to set the guy up for failure, right? Like, I mean, it's right. It's one thing to have a running game and then have him hit some easy passes and then to go from there. It's another thing when you're asking him literally to win the game the same way you're asking Clifford to. It's easy for everyone just to blame Clifford when things are going poorly. Are you going to be able to do the same thing when Aller is the quarterback? Probably not, because everyone's going to realize, oh, maybe it wasn't the quarterback. So that's my concern.
Yeah, and Aller, I totally agree with you. I don't think it's even close. He doesn't have the mobility that Cliff has. He's a big guy. He's different though. He's big and he's tough to bring down. And we really haven't had that. I mean, Hack was tall, but he wasn't as bulky as Aller already is, and he's only a freshman. So, like he looks like a defensive end, like when you look at him. So he's going to be tough to bring down. And I would also say, like, look at Tom Brady, Peyton Manning. I mean, NFL, and I'm talking about NFL guys. They're not mobile, but they're able to move around in the pocket. Like and I'm not a big Tom Brady guy, but I always liked about him, like, he always knew where to be. Like, he knew where to move, he knew where to run, he knew where to line, he knew where to just be in the pocket. And that's something that a lot of mobile quarterbacks can't do, and they still get sacked a lot. And so mobility, what I'm trying to say is mobility doesn't equal pocket presence. And Allen has shown a bit of an ability to have some pocket presence. Now, where I do worry about him is pre-snap. And that's just something that you're not going to have over a 6-year quarterback. No freshman quarterback is. You could have this, and that's not an indictment on Drew Aller. He's learning, and I think, you know, if he does play this year, by the end of the year, he's going to have a way better grasp of that already in just a few months, just playing football and going over film with Mike Yurcich. Brings me to Mike Yurcich. So Mike Yurcich is taking a lot of fire right now, justifiably so. Truth be told, Drew Aller is this type of quarterback, like a gunslinger. He coached up Mason Rudolph. Like, that's his type of guy. So maybe Yurcich really wants to see him, and maybe we'll get the full Mike Yurcich experience if he has his right quarterback. And that's not excusing how he coached yesterday, not at all. But maybe we'll be able to firmly grasp what Mike Yurcich is supposed to bring to this offense.
I think that's a really good point, Sean. I think that's a really good point. As far as, yeah, maybe that is the difference. But I will say this, and this is maybe a bad example, but Bill O'Brien was able to coach up Matt McGloin and make him look like a superstar before he had Hackenberg. And I'm not saying Clifford is the bee's knees. Hell, maybe at the end of the day, Clifford's not even as good as Matt McGloin. I don't know. You can have that argument. But my point is, Clifford seems willing and able to learn and to be better. I'm not saying he's got, at the end of the day, you only have, the card. You can only use the cards you have in your hand, so, as much as you can, right? You can only play the cards you have to the best of your ability. And Clifford clearly doesn't have the same throwing cards that Aller has. So I get that. But I mean, what are we really going to see that's different? Is Yurcich going to just start throwing more out routes on the wide side of the field that Aller could probably make a little bit better? Or, I mean, what are we really going to see more of that is going to help Aller look better than Clifford? I mean, is there a whole different playbook out there? Is it just, I mean, we didn't even really, I thought the slant routes were really open there all day. The hitches and the slants were there all day. And Clifford was hitting them. I mean, it wasn't like he was missing. I think he missed one, to be fair. But he hit Parker Washington. He hit Strange. He hit Tinsley on one. I think he missed on Tinsley on one, too. But it wasn't like there was a bunch of, like, blatant misses. And maybe that's just because Yurcich doesn't want to set Clifford up to fail in that regard. But I would also argue, Sean, that if Aller was, and I'm not arguing you, obviously, but if Aller was capable of bringing that offense to the next level, I feel like they would have done that already. I mean, I just don't think the way football is nowadays, college football, you don't have a year of just saying, oh, whatever, we can wait till next year. That is ask Kirk Shiraka how that goes, right? I mean, if you don't produce, you could be out. And this is not even his first year now. This is year number 2. So I don't think Yurcich is sitting there thinking, oh, just wait till next year. I think he's trying to put the best offense out in the field right now, and that is with Clifford. So, yeah, if there's plays and route trees out there that we're not running because Clifford's arm strength and ability, that Aller would be able to come in and do better, I'm all for it. Let's see it. But I feel like that isn't the case. And I just feel like that's football. But maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I mean, I think Aller does a couple things that I think his release is a little quicker than Cliff's. So he throws a tighter spiral, and he throws the ball gets to his intended target a little quicker.
I agree with that 100%.
Yeah, so he's got that. I think you might see more downfield shots with Drew Aller. But again, we talked about the downfield shots a little bit. part of the problem is the receivers are having more trouble separating. And yeah, in 2019, when he had KJ Hamler, we did throw downfield quite a bit. 2021, when we had Jahan Dotson, yeah, because we had a guy who could run away from corners. This year, we don't really have that burner. And if we do, he's not ready yet. A guy like Omari Evans, who I really like, but he's just not there yet. And that's, I think that's more of a receiver problem than a Clifford problem. Because yesterday, I mean, I agree with Corey. One of his best passes all season was to Trey Wallace. And Trey Wallace didn't have if I remember correctly, he didn't have a huge degree of separation. He had a step on the corner.
No, he did not.
Yeah.
Yeah, he made a nice
step
catch
on the corner. Yeah, and he did. Credit to him. He made a great catch on it. But it's not like he burnt his corner and left him in the dust. I mean, he was tackled a few yards after. So yeah, I don't put those deep balls so much on Clifford, but I do think Aller would give you. I think he would be able to get that ball out a tad quicker than Cliff could.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also would say that we saw Aller sitting in the pocket with no one to throw to just as much as we've seen Clifford throw. I mean, people literally think Clifford's holding on to the ball just to hold on to the ball. And I saw Aller like looking downfield like, I got no one to throw this ball to just as much. So I don't think Clifford is holding on the ball like he's gun shy. I think, if anything, Clifford can be reckless with it sometimes. I think he looks and he's like, wow, I have no one to throw this football to right now. And he also knows I have about 2 seconds before I'm going to have to step up in this pocket or move, so I better figure it out. So I think there's a lot of positives with Aller, and I'm excited for him. I don't want people to think I'm not. I just don't know if he provides immediate dynamic difference that makes this offense all of a sudden a bunch better. At the end of the day, you got to run. I mean, the running backs end up with 30, maybe they had 39 yards, I think, in total rushing yards for just the running backs. I mean, Kevon Lee actually had one rush for 6 yards, was one of the better looking runs of the day. But you got to do better than that. And again, everyone wants to say, oh, the offense has to stay on the field more. Why can't the defense get off the field and give this offense more chances? The offense only got 3 drives. Now, they got a pick 6, so that obviously changes things. But the offense only got 3 drives in the first half. You're not going to wear out any defense, don't care who you're facing, if you only get 3 drives on offense. And one of those drives, 65 of it came on one play. So it wasn't even like a long, sustained drive. So it's obviously their fault for going 3 and out in the first 2 drives. Excuse me. But you kind of need more than 3 drives to get rhythm, to get confidence, and to start wearing down the defensive line, and that also didn't happen. So there's plenty of blame to go around. I was really disappointed with the receivers, like you said. I think this is a game where you wanted to see Parker Washington maybe step up and make some big plays. He really didn't. He had that nice catch early on where he worked for some yak afterwards. I was like, okay, here we go. And we didn't really see that very much. I was disappointed. I thought Mitch Tinsley was going to win some one-on-ones. I don't really know how many opportunities we gave him to win those that weren't silly plays, but I was hoping that we'd see him get open a little bit more. I don't think we even ran our play-action boot levels play with Strange and then Tinsley coming across. I don't even think we ran that play, and that has been our bread and butter for a lot of them. So that was disappointing. You know what? Yeah, no, they didn't. They ran a play-action pass out of shotgun to open the second half, and it was an incomplete, but it wasn't that play-action boot from under center. And then, Sean, I wanted to mention this because this is something Franklin brought up. That offensive pass interference call on Singleton, which was the right – on Warren, I guess, technically, but on a Singleton catch, that was the right call. It was ticky-tack, and it was close. It was literally like a yard downfield. Right call. But this is the sort of thing where I don't know who you're supposed to blame for something like that. Because Franklin said in the press conference afterwards that they literally went over that play because it happened to Indiana. And we watched that Indiana-Michigan game. We literally saw that play happen. He said they specifically went over that play with Indiana against Michigan to talk about, if we run this, you've got to stay behind the line of scrimmage. So, I don't know what else. What do you – and it's just a freshman mistake probably at the end of the day. But if the coaches bring it up in practice and they mention that specifically and then it still happens in the game, I mean, what else do you do, Sean, besides just put your hands up in the air, right? I mean, you're just like, shoot. And that really was a huge play. It was a 7-point game at that point, and then it made it into a 3rd and 19. it better if he just drops it and it's an incomplete pass. So to me, that was frustrating because it's like, and I'm sure Franklin's frustrated, but like, what are you supposed to do? Like, you brought it up in practice, you're prepared for it, the play worked, and we just didn't execute. And stuff like that to me, Sean, just that's, I guess, disheartening, right? You do everything you're supposed to do, and a play like that, one of your such as better play calls of the day, big third down conversion, and it's wiped off the board, and really was the end of the game.
Yeah, that particular play, you have to show awareness, and that's on Nick Singleton. If he's told to do this, then you got to do it. And it goes back to what I've been saying about Nick Singleton. Like, he's got to be better than he's been. He's got to play better. He's one of our best players, and he's not playing at a high enough level right now. And I know he's a true freshman. But you have 6 games under your belt now. So you got to step it up this last half of the season. And I'm confident he will. He's going to turn it around. He's a young kid. You got to, you got to give young people time in general. So you got to give him time, and he'll be fine. One of the plays that I think really set the tone, I'm surprised we haven't brought it up yet, the 3rd and 1 on our first drive. And we load up the tight ends on one side. We have one receiver out. I thought that was a perfect chance for a play action boot and find Strange. And I think it would have been there because they really stacked up against the run. And I think we were trying to establish a run and be like, oh, we're going to punch you in the mouth too. But nah, I think if you run a play action, you roll Cliff out, you get him on the run, find Strange, it's probably an easy throw. So I didn't like that. But, I don't know. It was just an all-around just frustrating game from play calling to executing, and there just wasn't a whole lot of positive.
Yeah.
Do we want to get into special teams? Or do we still got
No,
more?
yeah, we can. I will say that, I mentioned that, like, even if you're going to run that 3rd and 1, even if you're like, I want to run it, why isn't Katron Allen in for that play, in my opinion? Like,
great point.
And I know you don't want to go to that necessarily, but it was just something where, again, I think if Katron Allen's there, it's a little bit different. But I agree. Play action there, get Clifford a chance to either run or just throw a little dink and dunk. I agree. I mean, anything. That was a super unimaginative 3rd and 1 to start the game. I mean, you could go to something fancy there. You could go, I mean, we saw Parker Washington come across on a jet sweep in previous games. Even if you don't give it to him, the motion there maybe gives you enough space to pick it up. Anything besides just running right at them. I mean, or even a QB sneak there. I mean, I would have liked to see Sean Clifford, maybe there's nobody in the A gap right there on that right side. Maybe he doesn't get it, but anything besides what we saw. So, that was upsetting. Yeah, we can go special teams. Why not? I'm going to give a little bit of love to Jake Pinniger. I know it was like a 27, 29-yard field goal, but Jake Pinniger made his field goal, so yay. I mean, he gave us the lead. I mean, that was a big kick at the time. I mean, it gave us the 17-16 lead. There's a moment there where you're like, okay, defense shores up a couple things. Offense moved the ball. Here we go. We got ourselves a game. And that was not what happened. But at that moment, that was a huge kick. So maybe I shouldn't underrate that kick. It gave Penn State the lead. It was an easy kick as far as conditions. There was wind, I should say. But as far as sunny, not wet, under 30-yard field goal attempt, you got to make those. But he did on the road. So good job, Pinniger.
Yeah, I mean, this wasn't Jake Pinniger's fault we lost this game. I thought he was good on kickoffs too when he had his chance. So yeah, that was good to see. Gabe Nwosu kicked one out of bounds, so we weren't totally clean on special teams. Kick return again, Nick Singleton. I don't know why he's returning kicks, to be honest. Just even if he was playing spectacularly. I mean, from a depth perspective, we only have 3 scholarship running backs right now, guys. Like, that's scary thin. That Tank Smith is only a couple hits away from probably getting some serious time. And nothing against Tank. We all love Tank. But, I mean, he's not a scholarship guy. So, And I think Singleton struggled with the wind. I think that was a big part of it because it seemed like that windy part of the field where even Barney had trouble getting punts down close to the goal line. I think he really had trouble with that. And again, that's something that you'll learn, but it's a time where I would have liked to have a guy like Parker Washington who's used to windy conditions like that. Maybe a guy like Parker back there. But
yeah, that one kickoff, Sean, where that was just kind of the whole game summed up, where it looked like it was going to go out of bounds or in the end zone, and it just hit and stopped and went right up in the air. When that happened, I was like, I'm not even mad at Singleton for that, but I was like, that just kind of sums up the game right there.
Exactly.
In hindsight, I was like, that's just kind of how it is. But no, it's Stacey Collins says that they were close on a couple of kick returns for touchdowns against Auburn. To me, I haven't seen anything where I'm like, oh yeah, Singleton has to be back there because he's dynamite, right? Like if it's Saquon Barkley and he literally provides you like a 10 or 15% chance of taking it to the house in a game like that, okay, I'm for it. But I haven't seen that yet. And to be honest with you, you're right. You gotta keep him fresh and also keep him healthy for the running back situation. And we don't have anyone else that is like athletic enough to be back there that's a game changer. To me, I don't believe that. Omari Evans, Parker Washington, if you want to be more of a like safe about it and still has some wiggle. But Tinsley's just shown some wiggle. Keandre Lambert-Smith, I think, might be one of the faster guys on the team. And that's not even talking defensive backs. Like there's nobody else we feel great about. So Daquan Hardy at some point was there, but he's not even a part of that. So yeah, I agree, Sean. That was not a lot to talk about special teams wise, but not necessarily anything to gloat about besides the field goal. Barney Moore had one good punt inside the 20 that had a good roll. I think he was keeping them lower because of the wind, would be my guess. 15-mile-an-hour wind is hard to manage for punts. That's another punt he had later in the game wasn't his best punt, but again, if we're talking, the reason we lost this game had nothing to do with the punter or the kicker today, Sean.
No, not at all. Special teams are important. That's why we dedicate time to talk about them each week. But in a game like yesterday, does anybody really care that Gabe Newsom kicked the ball out of bounds? Gabe might have given Michigan good field position once, but it felt like it didn't matter if they were starting at their own 10-yard line every drive.
It wouldn't have.
It would just be a longer drive for them.
Yeah, just more time off the clock. That's why I was totally okay with going for it on that fourth down early in the third quarter, because your offense or your defense literally had not stopped them yet, besides the pick six. That was it. Like that's, to me, I keep going back to it. If the defense had shown they could stop it, I think that takes a little bit of pressure off of the offense. But they literally couldn't stop Michigan. And I'm going to probably, when I think about this game for the next week, to me, I'm going to keep going back to that. I just do not remember a time where they literally could not stop at all. Like, it literally couldn't stop them. And I don't know if that's ever happened since I've been alive. Like, it just literally not once they couldn't stop them. And we thought that Illinois game that happened last year that had so much success on the ground was because P.J. Mustipher was out. He was there. And Beeman was there. They were both not in that Illinois game. So to be at full strength, Keziah Izzard was back, to be at full strength like that and to just get blown off. Maybe they should have went to like 4 DTs. Just put Beeman at end, put like Devon Ellies at the other end, and then, 2 guys in the middle. And then, I don't know. At that point, I would have liked to see more. Since we're trying to just randomly throw thoughts in here right now, I will, if we're going to give credit to anything, Jair Brown played that defensive end spot in the red zone, and that was a nice play. That was something positive to take out of it. So there were moments. There were moments where they had TFLs, and they looked good, but not enough to get the job done. So that. You ready for fan questions, Sean?
I'm ready. I'm sure the takes are spicy this week.
Yeah, I did not include all of the takes because we appreciate you guys on Twitter at Hardcore PSUFB. I had to mute the phone because the phone was just constantly going off. So I will say this. If you wish for any player to have season-ending injuries, you will be blocked on Twitter. That's all I'm going to say about it. That's just how it's going to be. I mean, we get a lot of terrible tweets about us, insulting tweets, all sorts of stuff. That just comes with the territory. Doesn't get under my skin, doesn't get under Sean's skin. But to be honest with you, I don't really want to associate. I don't want your interaction. I don't want you liking our tweets. I don't want anything to do with you if you're that low of a person. So that's just kind of the. You can say things bad about us to a certain extent, and we're not going to care. You can say we're lousy, we're lazy, whatever the case may be. But there's a line, and I think that's a fair line to draw in the sand there. So. A lot of takes that don't, agree with us, and that's totally fine. I think we appreciate that. I did want to say, Sean, just because we like a tweet doesn't necessarily mean we endorse the tweet. We typically like tweets because we appreciate the discussion. That doesn't necessarily mean we agree with what you having to say. And so I wanted to make sure that wasn't clear. We appreciate the conversation. I mean, we've talked about a bunch about that on this pod. We enjoy conversing with you guys, whether or not you agree with us or not. So that's totally cool. But yeah, let's try to not, which I feel like 99% of you don't, but let's not try not to wish injuries upon any player, our player or someone else's player. So fan questions, I only have 2 that were actually posted to the thread I had for questions. There was a lot of random questions. I think we covered 99% of them. I actually think we covered a lot of them already here, but I want to get your final thoughts on some of these, Sean. So fan question time. This one comes from We Are PSU Lions. Who is even to blame? I mean, I've been a Franklin supporter, but at what point does it become a him thing? Don't get me wrong. I don't think he's the total fall guy here, but this situation seems to be a common theme with Franklin. I think this is a great question. I think this is a question a lot of moderate Penn State fans feel at the moment. And it's a worthy question because Adam Bittner, I think, just tweeted about it. Penn State's kind of in purgatory right now. You're not as good as Michigan. You're not as good as Ohio State, but you're above, the Indianas and the Rutgers and the Marylands of the world. That's pretty obvious. They're getting better as far as beating down the people they should, but clearly disappointing against teams that, again, we didn't expect. Well, I didn't expect Penn State to win this game. And, Sean, you didn't expect it to be a blowout for Penn State. You thought it was going to be a really close game. We're not expecting Penn State to win these top 5 matchups, top 10 matchups all the time. We are expecting them to compete in these games. And I think that's low as far as expectations go. That should be what the expectation is. You don't need to win the game on Saturday, but you needed to at least look alive. And so you get to this question because of it. They're recruiting extremely well. We have 45-something guys in the NFL that are going to play today on Sunday. You've had talent there. Are you not developing well enough? Are you just not simply having enough guys on offense, along the offense and defensive line? What is the issue at the end of the day? Is it just Franklin is a really good recruiter and a really good CEO, but he's only as good as his coordinators take him? What is, at the end of the day, the way to take that next step? It's something that Franklin mentioned during the elite versus being really good conversation. They haven't taken that step, Sean. And I guess the blame is everywhere. But I do feel like, and I don't think Franklin would shy away from this, at the end of the day, the buck does stop with him, right? I mean, you got to find a way to get over the hump and beat some of these teams. Now, look, I'll be the first one to tell you I think Penn State competes against Ohio State at home. Just, again, because of who they are. We jokingly talked about how I'd be more scared or just as scared to play Illinois right now as I would Ohio State. Because I think Illinois, Brett Bielema would run the ball 50 times and call it a day either way, right? But how do you take that next step, Sean? And the blame goes everywhere. But at this point, I think that you have to start blaming Franklin to a certain extent, but also, especially starting next year, when you have the 5-star quarterback, you're running out, and presumably a better offensive line yet again if they take another step. If they're not better next year, especially, I don't really know where else the blame could go at this point.
Yeah, I mean, the buck does stop with the head coach. And we shouldn't have gotten blown out yesterday, guys. It just shouldn't have happened. I mean, I don't know what else to tell you. We shouldn't have gotten blown off the field. And this is the third time this has happened at Ann Arbor in the James Franklin era. So yeah, I mean, it ultimately rests with him. And I never have been. I wasn't one of those people chanting "Fire Franklin" at the Minnesota game in 2016. I was there. I was mad at halftime, but I wasn't one of those people. I never have been, and I'm not right now. I'll say this. If we collapse again, if we continue on this roller coaster, and Fox illustrated this yesterday, we started off in 2020 losing 5 straight games. And then we won 4 straight games. And then last year we won 5 straight games, and we opened up, we won our first 5 games, and then we still finished 7-6. And now this year we won our first 5, and we lost to Michigan. If we collapse again, then yeah, I'm probably done with Franklin too. Because at that point, yeah, it's on you if that happens again. Now, it hasn't happened yet. I'm not Nostradamus. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. But it's time for him to stabilize his program and to be able to come off a loss. Yeah, that will be on him. Was yesterday a total cluster F? Yeah. Does it ultimately rest with James Franklin? Yeah, but like I said, the coordinators weren't good. The players didn't play well enough. I know the players are capable of playing better than they played yesterday. Is that ultimately on him? Yeah. Is strength and conditioning ultimately on him? Yeah. Is not recruiting offensive tackles ultimately on him? Yeah. But what's really on him is if his team takes a total nosedive, because there's no excuse for that again. Not 2 straight years.
Yeah, and I'm not ready, and I'm not saying you thought that they're gonna take that nosedive. I know you didn't say that. I'm not ready.
Right.
I'm not ready to hit the panic button there. As far as the players not playing, look, unless we were 100% wrong as far as the defensive line, like blatantly wrong, I don't think we see the defensive line play that bad the rest of the season. I mean, I get it. Michigan's really good. That probably is going to be the best offensive line Penn State plays. If they play that poorly again, I really think you can start to blame a lot more on Franklin. I don't know how much was Franklin, but I'm not ready to hit the panic button yet. I will say this. I'll be pretty happy, and it seems silly, but I think we're at this point. I'd be pretty happy if Penn State comes back and blows the doors off of Minnesota. You know what I mean? If they can respond like that,
absolutely, against
a team like Minnesota, who really might be reeling a little bit, you lose to Ann Arbor. If they come back out and they look good against Minnesota, they run the ball well, they have success, and they, let's just say, win by like 20 points. I'd be like, wow, like that's to me a big step for the program. Which again, people are like, oh, you're grasping at straws, but to me, that's a big moment to come out after a devastating loss, a loss that's really going to a gut check. If they can come out and look good against Minnesota, I think that's a good sign that things are okay. And you probably lose to Ohio State, and if you get to 10-2 on the year, as bad as this Michigan game was, I think we can say, okay, Penn State's looking in the right direction, especially if Aller plays down the stretch and looks like he's going to be the guy. Then I think the season can still very well be a huge success. But you're right, Sean. There is a rightful concern about what could happen. And it's fair to think that. I'm not there yet, but I think it's totally fair for fans to think that. And if that does happen, I'm not sure who else you have to blame. The reason I think Penn State's kind of stuck in purgatory, though, is what do you do? Because I don't know if there's anyone out there that is like obviously going to be better for this program. I mean, it's not like he's recruiting terribly. It's not like he's not putting his team in positions to beat these top 10 teams. It's just like what do you do? Because you don't want to be like Nebraska and fire a guy who's winning you 9-ish games most years, 9 to 10 games most years, and then come back and get someone who doesn't even recruit as well, and then you're losing those games because you can't even compete or have the same horses. But at the same time, how long do you just sit and be okay with 10 wins or 9 wins or God forbid, another 8-7 win season? So it's something to pay attention to. Let's move to the next question. And this is, again, kind of on the same rabbit hole. This is from Michael. Is Franklin just not as good of a recruiter as everyone makes him out to be? The perceived talent never lives up to the expectations on the field. We talked a little bit about this at the beginning of the episode. Michael, we appreciate the question. I think there's two perceptions that need to be understood about Franklin recruiting. And it's very obvious if you look at the recruiting rankings. Like, you can have a top 15 class with a bunch of skill possession guys and look good, right? Like, you can get 2 or 3 really good running backs every year that bumps up your rating and makes it look better. But if you're up until maybe last year, if you're only recruiting 3-star offensive linemen most of the time, I think it does put a ceiling on your team. And Deni Dennis Sutton guys are going to make your team better in the long run, right? Like, those are the guys that obviously make your team better. I don't know how often Penn State, as well as their recruiting, get guys that are obvious impacts like that. Like, yeah, Singleton, I think, could be that. But again, he's a running back. You need guys along the offensive line and defensive line that immediately make impacts, that really just change how your team is going to be up front. DDS, I think, is one of those guys. I think PJ Mustafer was one of those guys. He was really good right from the get-go. You got a guy in a world of transfer portals. I think Chop Robinson is that guy. I think Olu Fashanu has been that guy as quickly as you could ask him to be that guy. But how many times, Sean, have we not had those guys, especially in the offensive line? So you can have really good players at skill positions that make it to the NFL. But if you don't have the consistent, highly ranked guys along the offense and defensive line, I think you can look like you're recruiting better than you actually are. And sometimes, especially on defensive line, they get really good players that are athletes, that are going to be really good at rushing the passer or maybe potentially even playing in space, but they can't line up against Michigan and dominate. I mean, look at Brandon Smith, right? I mean, he was a 5-star guy that was supposed to be a huge asset. And although he had his moments, was never really what he was supposed to be. You look at guys like, I don't know, you go really far back to Paris Palmer days and stuff like that. Guys that really never lived up to the moments. Hell, even like a Ryan Bates or somebody like that. Now, on the offensive line, again, Burkmeyer coming in, Javen Williams coming in. You think those guys are top-tier guys that change things. Tangwa, a guy who has been what you expected to be. I'm forgetting somebody that I wanted to mention on the offensive line that I think. Oh, Drew Shelton, I think, is going to be that guy from what we've heard. So I think it's getting better as far as that perception. But if you look overall, the skill guys can only win you so many. Like, the skill guys are going to win you the games against the Marylands, the Indianas of the world, Sean. They're not going to, or I guess the weaknesses in these classes are going to show up against the Ohio States and the Michigans of the world, and or if you get injuries.
Yeah. I think Corey answered that really, really well, actually. Is he as good as a recruiter as he's made out to be? I mean, I don't know if he's an elite recruiter, but he's a very good one. Because you have to keep in mind, a team like Ohio State, Georgia, Bama, they're already established. Like, it's easier to recruit at those places. It just is. They have all the money for, like take the dorms at Penn State. I don't know how many people know this, but the players dorm their freshman year amongst this, and they have apartments with students too, but like their freshman year, they dorm amongst the students. Saquon Barkley lived the floor up from me my junior year and his freshman year at Beaver Hall. Beaver Hall was built in the 1950s, and it looks like it was built in the 1950s. I was fine with it, but like, I'm not a highly recruited guy. Nobody really cares if Sean King goes to Penn State. They care if Saquon Barkley goes to Penn State. They care if any of our top recruits go to Penn State.
You're highly recruited to us, Sean.
Yes, I was highly recruited by Hardcore Penn State Football, but not by the Penn State football team. Just things like that we just don't have. Like, we don't have player dorms. I mean, so that makes it easier. The program itself makes it easier to sell. Their nutrition programs. I mean, so much stuff goes into be able to landing recruits. And there's a big difference between recruiting like we do, which is top 15, which is good. Like Corey pointed out, that's going to beat you more times than not, the Indianas of the world, the Marylands of the world. It is. There's a big difference between recruiting in the top 15 and recruiting in the top 5 consistently. Like, you're getting multiple guys like DDS in a recruiting class. And we get one, which is something, but that's only one guy. You're getting multiple. You're getting guys like PJ Mustard for every year. So you're getting those real beefy defensive tackles that you need in Big Ten play every single year. And a lot of times, a few of them. And guys that are even better than PJ. And I know I was kind of tough on PJ in this podcast. I like PJ, but you're getting guys that are even better than him. Guys like Jordan Davis, that are game changers. They're game wreckers at defensive tackle. And that makes you not only a conference contender, a national championship contender. And I think that's where we all want Penn State to be able to, be a top 10 program and compete for a national championship when you get your chance. And so as Franklin, I do think Franklin, if he was given Georgia's capability, what they're capable of, or even a Texas, I think he'd be recruiting in that top 5 to 7. Now, recruiting's not everything, and it's important to point that out. And I don't think that would solve all of James Franklin's problems, but it would solve some of them. I mean, it would solve some of them.
I agree. And also, people don't understand that recruiting in Georgia or recruiting at Michigan or at Ohio State or Texas, it's easier. First of all, more athletes, more guys to choose from in Michigan, in Ohio, in Georgia, and Michigan has a really good pipeline in New Jersey. Just overall, I think Michigan recruits better nationally than Penn State. Penn State recruits well, really well, actually. But there's not a bunch of kids in Pennsylvania that are top prospects. A good class might have 6 or 7 that are top 300. Maybe. Years in past, I think it was 2020 class, had 1 or 2 guys, and that was it. And I think as well as Franklin there's limitations. He's going to recruit Pennsylvania, Maryland, New Jersey, Virginia really well. But he's not going to go, and we'll throw Florida in because of what Sider's been able to do. But he's not going to be consistently going into places and winning a lot of them. And when he does, it's a big deal. Like he went and got Kalen King from just in Detroit. That's a big win for him. And he can do that when I don't think a lot of other coaches would be able to win those kind of recruiting battles. But it's not easy for recruits to get to State College. You can fly into Detroit and be in Ann Arbor in 25 minutes. And everybody can get to Detroit from anywhere pretty much right away. You can't fly to State College directly from pretty much anywhere. And if you're going to drive there, it's not an easy drive from anywhere. There's so many. If you just look at the amount of, you can get from Cincinnati to Ann Arbor pretty damn easily compared to State College to anywhere else. You got Pittsburgh and you got Baltimore and you got Philly. And that's really about the only thing that's relatively close. And he does well there, but the amount of talent isn't the same. So I think that goes against Penn State, and I think Penn State's recruiting well. I don't know realistically how much better, but at the level they're recruiting, Sean, I think they've hit their ceiling. They might get a little bit better. I think maybe they get top 10s every once in a while and top 15s most of the time. I think that's about their ceiling, which is fine, I think, for my expectations of Penn State. But then you have to be able to develop everybody else to get them there. If you have a star that can play right away, a 5-star guy that can play right away and be great, that's awesome. But those other 3-star guys you get, A, you have to hit on them, especially along the offensive line, and B, even if they can't start as offensive linemen as sophomores or juniors, they better have developed enough by the time they're redshirt juniors to be able to start. And I don't think that happens enough. So if you are going to recruit like Penn State does, you nail the 5-star guys and the 4-star guys like they are doing. But then your 3-star guys, you have to develop them more like Wisconsin, more like Iowa, more like Minnesota's able to do. You combine your blue chip recruiting with their development ability, I think you then get to a level where you are consistently among the top 10, top 15 teams with a chance to be elite every once in a while. That's really the ceiling for Penn State. And I think that means Franklin is recruiting well enough. I think this question is, he is a good enough recruiter. I don't know if he is developing enough at certain positions to fully flesh out Penn State's potential yet. I'm not saying he's not far behind it, but I think Penn State could be a little bit better with everything else staying constant and the development being a little bit better. However, you get rid of Franklin, maybe they develop guys better, but maybe they don't get any of the game-changing guys anymore. So you got to be careful with that, right? Like, okay, yeah, you might develop all the 3-stars into really good players, and you might go 8-4, 9-3 every year, but now you're not getting any of the DDSs. You're not getting any of the Nick Singletons. You're not getting any of the Jahan Dotsons or whatever argument you want to make. So you got to be careful with it. The best of both worlds is doing what Franklin's doing right now in the recruiting world, plus developing your 3-star guys into eventual starters by halfway through their careers.
Well, I mean, I want to push back on that a tad. I think we could recruit better. So how do you recruit better? Win. Winning is important, and showing that you could compete with teams, like a Michigan, like an Ohio State on a regular basis. And I think part of that, maybe Drew Aller, maybe he can take us to that next level that we haven't been before. Maybe he is that guy, that elite quarterback that we have been searching for. Like, take a look at Clemson. Like, before Deshaun Watson, like, they had guys like Taj Boyd, good college quarterback, sort of that they were a little different style, but sort of like Trace, like really good college quarterback, but he wasn't Deshaun. Like that's a whole different thing. So winning is important. NIL, I think NIL gives you. I think Penn State's NIL potential is very, very high, and that should make Penn State fans very excited. And I think with a guy like Pat Kraft, guy like James Franklin, who are forward-looking CEO types, yeah, I think that's something that we could really tap into and maybe win some of these recruiting battles against teams like, I don't know, like a team like Maryland can't steal a 4 or 5, like a guy like Chop Robinson out of high school. Maybe that can't happen anymore. And stuff like that, that's huge. That, okay, maybe we can't quite compete with Ohio State, but we could take these recruits from the Marylands of the world, the 5-star guys that they get. If there's usually Rutgers has a few high-quality guys. Take a couple of them. So I do think there are ways for us to recruit better. But how much better do I think we get in that top 3? I mean, I still think we're a ways away, and we probably have to start competing for national championships to do that.
Yeah, I mean, you get into the chicken and egg argument, but I agree. I think it can be better. If I had to choose right now, Sean, between recruiting better or developing better, I think I choose development. You know what I mean?
Me too.
As far as like what maybe we could see Franklin doing better, but I think those questions kind of tie things well together. So thank you for those questions as always. Yeah, Hardcore PSUFB. We always ask for questions on Twitter, so make sure you are getting there for those questions. Sean, I think we can pretty much wrap this one up. I do want to, again, plug 5-star reviews on Apple. If you drop us a 5-star review, we'll read them on the show, and we'll show them on YouTube. We have the video now showing all of our 5-star reviews. We'll send you a sticker as well if you drop a 5-star review on Apple or if you drop a 5-star rating on Spotify. Just let us know, and we'll get that taken care of. We appreciate it. If you're watching on YouTube and you haven't already liked the video, we appreciate that, and please subscribe. If you're listening on podcast, make sure you're following wherever you're listening. We appreciate it. We will be back live. Sean, I believe you're cool, right, with Wednesday at 9 Eastern. So we'll go Wednesday, 9 Eastern. We want to go Wednesdays, not Thursdays. I just wasn't in town last Wednesday, so that gives us a little bit more time there. We appreciate all the feedback. Obviously, after Penn State losses, there's a lot more stuff to sort through on social media. So if we missed something, we apologize. But we appreciate all the feedback and support. You guys have been fantastic lately. It's been awesome. It stinks that Penn State kind of played the way they played. But we knew this stretch was going to be difficult, Sean. And if there's one maybe silver lining here, is we are going to get to see what this Penn State team is made of with the loss at the beginning of this stretch. Are they going to be able to step up and beat Minnesota? What's this quarterback situation going to look like if Clifford's hurt? What's it like if he's healthy? There's a lot of things kind of going into the Minnesota game that we're curious about. And we haven't even mentioned yet that it's a whiteout. So it should be something, Sean.
Yeah, to preview the preview a little bit. This is a huge week for Penn State. And right now they're watching film. They're going over corrections. It's probably tough. I don't know if you've seen those Coach 30 videos. It's probably a lot like those. Look them up on YouTube and Twitter. He's very funny. It's probably a lot like that right now. But that's where you learn. And, the team failed yesterday. They failed in preparing. They failed in execution. They failed coaching. And how do you come back from that? And that could be the defining thing about this team. Yes, the blowout. We're always going to remember getting blown out of Michigan. We're going to get mad about it when we think about it. But if we could say, man, and then we went, but at least the next week we crushed Minnesota. ... Then I don't know what happens after that. But I think that's going to propel us the rest of the year. I really do. I think that's going to give us a shot in the arm going into Ohio State. And I think we could be sitting here next Sunday being like, wow, we might have a chance next week. Maybe we really worked out some kinks, and it could go the other way. And if it goes the other way, and we, God forbid, lose to a Minnesota team that's reeling, and most likely will be without not 9th or 10th year senior Tanner Morgan, and we all hope Tanner gets healthy. But if they're without him next week, and we still lose, that will be devastating. Not only for this team in this season, but for the program in general. That'd be a devastating loss to lose that way in a whiteout game.
Yeah. I agree. I think be interesting to see. Obviously, we can get more into the preview on Wednesday, but it will be interesting to see if Manny Diaz changes things up, because you could theoretically run the same defense we would wanted to see against Michigan for this Minnesota game. So that will be interesting. Thank you guys so much for listening and for following, again, the content. And if you missed something, again, most of the stuff that we talk about is on YouTube now as well. So we appreciate it. Hopefully you get to enjoy some Penn State football today in the NFL. Sean, any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Just that there'll be better days. This day sucks, and it's all right to acknowledge that it sucks. But I mean, it's time to, get up off the mat and, get back at it next week. And I hope we can. Yeah,
I think I'll just leave it with the same quote I had earlier, as far as you're not as good as you think you are when you win, and you're not as bad as you think you are when you lose. So
very true.
Not saying, and maybe we're not at the bottom, but I think, I would like to think, even if Penn State isn't much better, I think we have to see a better showing from the defense next week. I couldn't imagine it being worse. So that being said, thank you guys so much for listening to Hardcore Penn State Football. For Sean Kane, I'm Corey Listoki. Until next time, we'll see you Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern. Take care, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.